First Africa Symposium on Technology-Facilitated Gender-Based Violence, and it's hosted by the Government of Canada, UNFPA in Benin and UNFPA in Kenya, the governments of Benin and Kenya, and civil society. My name is Janet Bogwa. I wear many hats. I'm a journalist, I'm an author, a gender equality advocate, and it's been such an honor being your moderator over the last day or two, going into day two, and to continue walking this with you today. Now, before we begin, I'd like us to go through some housekeeping just to make this experience comfortable, interactive, and inclusive for everyone. So allow me to make reference to my notes. Please confirm your preferred interpretation channel. It's something we emphasized a lot yesterday, and we're doing the same today. Please confirm your preferred interpretation channel and make sure your connection is stable. Now, your interpretation channel should be available in the chat, and make sure that you seek any answers or advice from the technical team. And now, to ensure everyone benefits fully from these interpretation services, we also kindly request all moderators and speakers to please speak slowly and clearly, just as I'm trying to do right now. And this is just to allow enough time for our interpreters to convey remarks accurately. Once again, our moderators, our speakers, please make sure that your presentations are made clearly and that you're speaking slowly. This is to allow enough time for the interpretation. Let's get ready for another engaging, insightful, and truly action-oriented day today. But before that, let's begin by revisiting some highlights from day one. From the insightful keynote to the powerful plenaries that underscored the realities of TFGBV across our continent. Let's take a moment and watch this video with those highlights. We want to thank everyone for joining us on this first Africa Symposium on Technology-Facilitated Gender-Based Violence. And the single purpose is this: creating safer digital spaces for women and for girls.
Dans le cadre de ce programme mondial sur rendre tous les espaces sûrs, ce que nous appelons en anglais making our space safe, marque une étape importante.
It is important that we all be involved to ensure online security of women and girls in Africa and all over the world.
Power to connect, to transform lives. However, in Africa and across the globe, for too many women and girls, it has also become a space for danger and exclusion.
Les violences facilitées par la technologie ne détruisent pas les corps. Elles sont prêtes à
technology-assisted gender violence is also something that touches our conscience because it affects the image of the farm and her capacity to be proved.
Forms of TFGBV are online defamation at 21.9%, cyberbullying at 19.1%, non-consensual sharing of intimate images 17.8%.
Online harassment, cyberstalking, digital exploitation are not violations of human rights only, but they are barriers to innovation, participation, and progress. If Africa and our population, especially women and girls, are unsafe online, then our digital economies cannot reach their full potential.
All forms of GBV are worrying in today's context of rising regressive laws and rollbacks in rights and freedoms, but tech-facilitated GBV has the potential to do widespread, deep, and instant harm to both individuals and entire groups of people by weaponizing technologies that for many are empowering and transformative.
Technology is not the enemy, it's the mirror. It reflects our society back to us. If inequality exists offline, it will amplify online. If justice is delayed offline, it will disappear online. So our mission is not to disconnect, but to reimagine connection, to make technology safer, inclusive, and healing for women and girls.
The so-called keyboard warriors, they worry They worry that I'm not out there in the streets and they have no one to put their hashtags on. They worry. And that's why they hide behind the screens as they make us scream, as they can't handle our real screams. They hang on their keyboards as they make our reputations hang on a thin thread.
Thank you so much for being with us on day one, and see you again tomorrow. And tomorrow is today. And thank you very much. I think just listening to those highlights reminds us how important this symposium is here today, and that our collective action is to put an end to technology-facilitated gender-based violence. Before I tell us a little bit about our next session, also just to say hi to all of you who are joining us from so many parts of the continent and the world. Bonjour, salam alaikum, habari, hola. All of those languages, by the way, are available in the interpretation channels. Tell us where you're tuning in from, your name, which country, what you do, the kind of work you're doing, even in this space, to put an end to TFGBV. We would love to hear from you, and we might share just a few names throughout this session. Now, today, our focus is towards TFGBV solutions in sub-Saharan Africa. And in regards to this, a poll link has been sent in the chat box. So make sure you look out for it. It should be in the chat box. Please make sure you open it and answer the polls. And this is the interactive session that we have, and it's titled Myth Busting Session on TFGBV Data. This will challenge common assumptions and highlight survivor-centered feminist approaches to data. I would like to introduce our moderator, Ella Wama Maha, Gender and Education Program Officer at Swiss Corporation, Benin. Now, she is also going to be getting those poll results, which you're going to be answering to, and she is going to shortly share those findings during the session that's coming up next, but those findings will also be displayed on the screen. So we'll all be able to have insights into what those findings are. And again, I hope you have already accessed that poll link in the chat. Contributions in this session, moderated by Ella, will come from Nasihu Kasumu, General Director of the Observatory for Family, Women and Children, Choma Agwebo, Executive Director at Tech Her NG, and Sandra Aseng, Executive Director at Women of Uganda Network. I would like to now hand over the session to Ella to take us through the findings in the poll and to also welcome the contributors for this session. Ella, over to you. Okay, we understand that Ella is not present at the moment for this session. And so what we will do is once again recap the speakers and contributors for this particular session. And I'll share their names again, and let's make sure as we say them that the speakers and contributors let me know that they're in the room and ready for the presentation. And so first, from the Observatory for Family, Women and Children, I would like to invite the General Director, Nasihu Kasumu, Dr. Nasihu Kasimu. I hope I've said your name correctly, Daktari. I'd also like to invite Choma Agwebo, who is the Executive Director at Tech Her NG. And finally, Sandra Aseng, Executive Director at Women of Uganda Network. Let's see whether we can take a look if our contributors are in the room, and in just a moment, we'll be going into the discussion. All right, perhaps Dr. Nasihu Kasumu, and again, I really hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. You can just say hello to our participants today, and once you finish sending your salutations, I'll invite Choma Awebo to do the same thing, and Sandra Aseng as well. So Dr. Nasihu Kasumu, please begin your salutations. And after you finish, you can hand it over to your colleague to also share salutations in the room today.
Merci beaucoup. Bonjour, Madame.
Thank you very much. Good morning to all. I am Dr. Nasihu Kasumu, General Director of the Observatory or Family Observatory in Benin. And it is a pleasure to participate in this symposium and also to be able to bring in the contribution of the government of Benin on the issue of TF-GBV. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Doctor. Apologies if you could hear my sound overlapping. I would now like to invite Sandra Aseng. Please share your salutations before we begin the conversation shortly. Thank you. Sandra, your microphone is on. We can see you very clearly. We're not sure we can hear you well. Please try again. Unfortunately, Sandra, we're still struggling to get your audio. Can you just take a moment and see that your settings are okay? If you do need any assistance, please let the technical team know. Once again, to all our participants who are tuning in from everywhere, we are just in a moment getting into a conversation on myth busting on TF-GBV data. And as I said moments ago, there is a poll link that has been sent in the chat box. Once you access that poll link, you can answer the questions, and those findings are going to be shared during this session, which should be starting in just a few moments. So if you haven't already, please take some time to take a look at the poll link. Those findings will form a critical part of the session that we are having in just a moment. Do bear with us to see whether Sandra Aseng has now managed to locate what issue is there with her audio. Sandra, please let's see if we can hear you now.
Okay, just checking. I removed the headset I was using. Can you hear me now?
Can hear you very well, Sandra. Please share your salutations to the room before we start the session.
Okay. Bonjour. Good morning, everyone. Sandra Acheng is my name, and I'm joining from Uganda, Kampala, currently serving as the Executive Director at Women of Uganda Network. And we champion women's rights online. Tech-facilitated gender-based violence is really a huge part of our work. I'm very excited to be joining this panel along the speakers that will be joining this and sharing this the insight on technology-facilitated gender-based violence. Thank you, and over to you.
We appreciate you. We're going to begin the conversation shortly. I'll be facilitating in place of Ella. As I await the poll results, I think we'll just begin the conversation, and I would like to start by posing a question to you, Dr. Nasihu. So there is this sense that there isn't enough data on TF-GBV in Africa to inform policy and action. So the question I have with that regard is it truly a lack of data, or is it a failure to value existing data? Which one is it, according to you? Oh, please unmute your microphone.
Activez votre micro, s'il vous plaît.
Okay,
M'entendez?
Oui.
Yes, we can hear you.
Ok, merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Merci pour
Thank you for those questions. You know, as we do that gender-based violence that is technologically facilitated represents an obstacle at a global region, and which also hacks away at equality. And like we also said, I think yesterday when the symposium started, in Africa, we are not spared by this violence. There were also witnesses, we had testimonies from people. We need to face online harassment and with all we have, and also be able to look at the psychological and social effects of this. Some of these are the real serious consequences. But in the case of this phenomenon and also in the consequences, it is clear that the question of statistical data is also needs to be addressed. Unfortunately, now gender-based violence, that is TFGBV, is generally not well documented, you know, globally. And this violence is normally minimized, it's not taken seriously. This to mean that the data that is available, you know, does not bring out the typology of this violence, how it shows out. The profile of the victims is also still shrouded in mystery today. So this stops us from having adapted or contextualized responses. There is almost no data that allows us to know, to go precisely to study the dimensions of this phenomenon. I would say this is that there are some studies that have been carried out by different people, and especially, for instance, this one that was carried out in 2020 by UNESCO and the International Center for Journalists that covered 15 countries, that also covered West Africa, where we had Nigeria and Ghana. But, you know, when we're talking about female journalists who were able to reveal to some extent, you know, what was going on in Benin, for instance, this year is when we've had our first exploratory study, and the minister in charge of social affairs with the family observatory, you know, carried out this study, and it's still exploratory, to just get more information so that we can also better address this phenomenon. Like we said, Benin and maybe like in many other parts of Africa and the world, most of the TFGBV that goes on just goes unnoticed. It slips into the system. And because that means that we still have a problem here, that we have myths. That means that we do not have a very good comprehension of the phenomenon globally. So, and given that we do not have sufficient data on what is going on, that it is the data that allows us to understand the phenomenon. So we also saw that there is a lack of data on TFGBV. But on the other side, even as we talk about this insufficient data, there is also the aspect of, you know, are we really using even the little data that may be available? You know, we find that there is under documentation, and also the data that is available is not really well used, well exploited to inform us. And this is in some countries, you know, we can maybe they've come up with some indicators to address this question, but the indicators may not be as sharp, as precise as we would want them to be. Now, in all these dimensions, so that we are able to also talk about these indicators in a very strategic matter. So in conclusion, and as I respond to your question, I would say that there are these two aspects that are linked to the question of data on TFGBV. The first aspect is lack of data. There is a very poor documentation And so we can talk about the absence of information on the globality of this phenomenon. And the second aspect of the question is that the little data that is there is not really used in an exhaustive way. That is what I would say in answer to what you asked. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for those insights. I think it's very critical there, saying that the data isn't really there. It's very scarce. There's not enough data that can give the full scope of TFGBV. And the second point he made there is even whatever available data is there isn't really being used to try and address this phenomenon. We'll come back and continue by asking Sandra a question. But before we do that, I can see that there's some poll results that have come in. Allow me to take a moment to go through the different categories of the questions on the poll, as well as, and you can see them actually, they're displayed on the screen. I'll just go over them briefly. Poll 1 asked or said there isn't enough data on TFGBV in Africa to inform policy and action. 83% of respondents said they agree, 17% say they disagree. Poll 2 said TFGBV data should remain objective and exclude emotional or subjective input from survivors to maintain accuracy. This one is almost split down the middle. 50% agree, 40% disagree. And the two others, very briefly, Poll 3, the biggest risk in TFGBV data collection is inaccurate data, not survivor harm. I think that's what it says. 47% agree, 47% agree, and 37% disagree. And finally, data ownership should rest primarily with governments and institutions. 33% agree, 60% disagree. That's something that I think can form the basis of a lot of the work that needs to go on to TFGBV. A kind request to our speakers and contributors, if you're able to keep your remarks and contributions brief, it will allow us more time to get through the program. So you'll allow me respectfully, if we're stepping a little bit over time, I might interject. It's not to disrupt your train of thought, it's just to make sure that we're keeping time for the symposium. Sandra, let's come to you. So poll 3 talked about the biggest risk in TFGBV data collection is inaccurate data, not survivor harm. How do ethical missteps in TFGBV research endanger survivors, in your view?
Okay, thank you for the question. Could you please confirm you can hear me now?
Can hear you very clearly, thank you.
Okay, so that's a very important question or discussion around ethical, which is a very important aspect, especially when researching around tech-facilitated gender-based violence, because it can seriously endanger survivors and also affect the quality of research, especially high-sensitive data, and also for vulnerable communities. So what I would say is that some of the main risks is around the breach of confidentiality, whereby survivors often share very deeply personal experiences. And if data is not anonymized or securely stored, it can lead to further harm, such as doxing, but also retaliation and also further abuse. And even indirect identifiers, such as their location, metadata, especially device metadata, and also screenshot can also expose identity. And also the aspect of re-traumatization, whereby poorly designed interviews or surveys that lack especially trauma-informed approaches can also trigger emotional distress, especially forcing survivors to relive harmful experiences without also adequate support. And in most cases, it's very important to ensure that when you are doing an interview, you could put in a budget that can cater for both the person that is doing the interview, but also the victim or the survivor who is being interviewed for some psychosocial support that would, it's like awakening something that has already been healed, which is very key. And also the aspect of lack of informed consent. If participants do not really understand how their data will be used, how it is shared, how it's stored, they may unknowingly also expose themselves to legal, social, and also safety risks. So very important to have consent in all other forms. Could be digital consent, it could also be physical consent, depending on the coverage of the participants. So that's they're also very clear. They're also accessible, and also ensuring that they're also translated into the languages that the communities you are interviewing understand, to ensure that the risk is being minimized. But also, most importantly, what communication channels are you using? So using very insecure channels can also allow abusers and third parties to intercept communications that put survivors at immediate physical or even digital risk. So using like hand-to-end encrypted video conferencing is very key. Some of it, like Signal, really offer very encrypted voice and video calls that are highly recommended for sensitive conversations. But also there is also the Jetis Meet, which is also an open source and can be deployed on your own server for maximum collection. But also Zoom, when you have end-to-end encryption enabled, it can also be used. But usually Zoom is they share that it has a lot of third-party data collection, but also other secure messaging apps that are very much encouraged, such as Element, that is very key as well. So I would like to end with saying that aspect of also misrepresentation and full narratives is very key, ensuring that when you're publishing the findings without the survivors-centered framing, it can also further perpetuate victim blaming and reinforce the stereotypes, which can lead to stigma and also discourage reporting. And the aspect of sharing raw data, especially with other researchers or organizations, without strict protocols, can also lead into secondary misuse, including also the use of commercial exploitation or exposure to hostile actors. And looking at also the intersexuality is very key. How do we ensure that it is also included? So ignoring the sexuality can lead to failure to account for the gender, the race, the disability, but also the socio-economic factors can also lead to policy recommendation that further harm marginalized survivors, that leave them more vulnerable even. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandra. Because we are actually coming to get some closing remarks, then we will allow you to give your recommendations. But again, some incredible insights there, just in terms of end-to-end encrypted platforms to secure the narrative of the survivor. So Sandra just taking us through a survivor-centered approach to dealing with TFGBV, including factors that sometimes one doesn't always think about: re-traumatization, triggers, lack of informed consent, and communication channels as just part of them. We are coming to the wrap of this session. I want to go back to Dr. Nasu just to give us some closing remarks. You had talked about a lack of data and that the little data that is there is not even being used appropriately. So I just want to find out from you, what are your recommendations in tackling this element of there not being enough data and that the data that is available isn't being harnessed effectively? You can just briefly give us that as you give us your closing remarks as well. Over to you. If you go a little bit over time, please allow me to interrupt. I wouldn't want to interrupt your trail of thought, but please proceed and let us know what your
Moi, je
thoughts are and
demanderais
closing
au
remarks.
docteur Nassirou de compléter et de nous dire si
I
vraiment
would
il y a la
like to ask Dr. Nasiru to let us know whether there's neutrality in data collection, or if the idea of feminism is taken into account during this data collection.
Bonjour tout le monde, bonjour à toutes et à tous.
Good morning, everyone.
Bonjour, Madame.
Je suis Ella Wama et je vous rejoins.
Ok, merci beaucoup. Bonjour, Madame Wama. Bonjour.
Good morning. Thank you so much. Good morning, Madame Wama. So the question of data collection is generally, it needs a lot of attention, especially concerning the evidence that is used, because you know that very often we find ourselves in a situation where the evidence that we have in the data and the information that we get may not always be verifiable. And so the situation we find ourselves in, this question of GBV facilitated by technology, makes it a bit difficult for us. So we think that it is important to expand the data collection aspect, look for evidence-based data, and also to find out whether we can involve feminist structures, and especially emphasize the importance of evidence-based data. So we would like to say that the different forms of evidence-based data should be given under certain conditions. For instance, in the documentation of the cases of violence-based violence based on gender. And then there is also the environment in which this violence is committed. The data to which we have access, we are able to do this. We are able to get this data. We need to just observe certain points. It is important to have digital proof. We need to look at the different types of messages that are sent. And then we need also to be able to document the information that we have, the impact of the incidents, and then the time also. We need to identify the witnesses. We need to identify those who witnessed, and we also need to be able to use software, relevant software, because that exists in order to be able to track the evidence. And then we need to be able also to consult experts, lawyers, and other experts who have expertise in criminality, and therefore be able to get the proof that we need. It is important to be able to get evidence and transmit it to the relevant authorities, because this violence, gender-based violence facilitated by technology, needs to be addressed through different means. And it is important to look at the objectivity and therefore be able to get proper proof of the situation. Thank you, Dr. Nassirou, especially concerning the means and the ways of collecting data. How do you think that researchers can, in an ethical manner, get information from survivors without traumatizing them afresh? Because we know that this can happen. So how do we make sure that survivors are not traumatized afresh? I think there are methods that can be used, which have been developed in Benin. For instance, we have put in place what we call integrated center for the care of victims of GBV. And we make sure that while collecting information, the victims are able to give all the information to all the concerned parties during this procedure. And we ensure also that the victim does not have to go back to destabilizing information and avoid making them repeat what traumatized them in the first place. So I think that that is the basis of the mechanism that we should put in place in order to help survivors. Thank you, Doctor. Now going to Madam Sandra. The biggest problem in data collection of GBV facilitated by technology. And how do you think that we can maintain ethics in research on violence facilitated by technology? How does this endanger survivors? To avoid endangering survivors, sorry.
Okay, thank you for the question. I think some of the were mentioned also in the previous, but maybe looking at some of the core safeguards and looking at the feminist ethical lens that could protect survivors and also avoid reinforcing harm. Looking at the core safeguards would be data minimization, whereby data should only be collected only when it's necessary for the case and also for the research purposes. And also the aspect of avoiding storing unnecessary metadata that could reveal location, identity, that is also very key. And the aspect of anonymization and also use maybe pseudonyms or that could not reveal the identity of the survivor and the victim could be very key. Ensuring that we remove identifiers, especially from screenshots, from logos or chat histories when we are conducting research, and using codes instead of names in the documentation, that is very key. And then documenting every step for evidence handling to maintain the integrity and also prevent tampering is very key. But looking at some of the feminist ethical principles that is very key is also looking at the survivor-centered approach, whereby there is need to prioritize safety, dignity, but also looking at the urgency of survivors over institutional or legal demands. We need to ask things like, how does this process really empower or disempower the survivors, which is very key. And also the do no harm, whereby we anticipate risk of retaliation, of stigma, or digital exposure. So the need to avoid practices that could re-traumatize survivors during evidence collection, and the aspect of intersectionality that is very key. Looking at recognizing how does gender, race, disability and sexuality also shape the digital vulnerability, and also adopt protocols for marginalized groups such as the LGBTQ plus groups, the rural women, and other groups that may belong to the marginalized or structurally silenced groups. And the aspect of transparency and accountability is also very key. Be clear about the limitations for example, looking at evidence that may not guarantee justice, and sharing findings responsibly to avoid the aspect of victim blaming. That is very key. And lastly, looking at participatory ethics that involve survivors in decisions about what evidence is collected and how it's used is also very key. And respecting their choices, even if they decide to decline to share certain data, that should be really respected. Thank you.
Merci, Madame Sandra. Vous avez déjà abordé
Thank you, Sandra. You have already answered a question that I was going to ask you. How can we guarantee what feminist ethic can help in data collection? Is there anything else that you can share with us? You have talked about respect of the victim during the collection of narratives. What else can we consider while collecting information on gender-based violence assisted by technology?
So I would say that that is broadly it in regards to data collection and looking at the feminist ethical principles that would be considered in regards to data collection. Yes, thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Merci aux contributions que nous recevons.
Thank you so much for the contributions that we are getting through the chat. Thank you, Madam Yvette Ouedraogo, for your contribution. Dr. Nassirou, Sandra, I would like to ask you, who benefits from the data on GBV TF? Thank you for that question. This data benefits certain people depending on their position. We have, for instance, but when we look at these different actors, we can say that they come in three categories. The first category of those who benefit from data collection, it is first of all the government and public institutions. That is the first category to benefit from this data. We are talking about the parliament, we are talking about the local government, because these are institutions that need to use this information to put in place policies and laws against this kind of violence. They are the engine. The second group is that of defenders of human rights. This is the second group of actors who use this information to sensitize and support victims. The third category of actors who benefit from data are the technological companies, because they use this data in order to improve their policies of moderation. So these are the three categories who need this data. We have also the question of we have the women rights defender organizations, and that's what I would like to say. I'm going to go to Madame Chioma, who has just joined us in the panel. We have just a few minutes. We ensure that the community does not just consume the data, but owns this data.
Thank you very much, everyone. And thank you for the question, Ella. I think there's an important responsibility, not just for us as, practitioners and people who work in trust and safety, but for us to put a lot of accountability and responsibility on the tech companies to come to us as partners, as opposed to coming to us as people who need, in quote, saving, or people who are just going to consume the information or consume the data or consume the technology. One of the reasons why we insist that we want to, on this side, on this part of the world, in the global south, why we insist that we want to be practitioners, or why we insist that we want to be co-creators, is because we know our peculiar circumstances. For instance, Sandra in Uganda knows what is peculiar for her context. Chioma in Nigeria, I know what's peculiar for my context. Same thing for Mr. Nasiru. And so if we are co-created with, as opposed to co-created for, we are able to determine what is useful for us. We know what abuse looks like in my country, in our countries. We know what protections are needed for women and girls in our countries. We know what technology-facilitated gender-based violence looks like in our countries, and we know how these contexts continue to work to harm women and girls. And so if we are invited as co-creators, if we push for our seat at the table to co-create, we're able to design platforms, we're able to design systems, but we're also able to design safeguards that ensure that our women and girls and our vulnerable people are protected as they use the internet. More importantly, we are able to integrate these protections into our already existing legislation to ensure that there are no gaps as far as instituting protections for women and girls as they use the internet.
Merci, Chioma.
Thank you, Chioma, for your observations and the use of the feminist ethics used. How can that be used? There is the possibility of using qualitative methods that respect the dignity during the data collection on this topic of violence facilitated by technology, and the fact that the community should be co-creator and not just beneficiary of the data. And then the fact that the digital platform is very important for the safeguarding of collected data. What does not exist, it's not only a question of data, it is a question of credibility also. So we need to innovate during this data collection.
embed it in within organizations as a culture. And we aim to continue engaging and collaborating with various innovators across Africa and around the world to ensure that we are championing safety first. And some of the key learnings that we've been able to capture include the recognition that tech platforms and developers have immense power to shape user experiences. And with that power comes great responsibility. The tech sector itself must begin to normalize safety by design standards in how they build, how they test, and how they ship their digital products, ensuring that safeguards are not just optional, but essential. And at the same time, regulators and policymakers also play a very vital role in creating enabling frameworks, incentives, as well as enforcement mechanisms that make safety by design the norm and not just an exception. And this includes also encouraging innovations that protect users' rights while holding platforms accountable for the environments that they create and the harms that are perpetrated on their respective platforms. So today's session is about exploring what that future looks like and where that African innovators lead the way in designing digital ecosystems that are safe, ecosystems that are inclusive, as well as empowering for all, and in particular for women and marginalized communities most affected by online violence. And this session will unpack the core principles of safety by design as a proactive approach to embedding safety, privacy, and security principles into the development and deployment of digital tools. And through this session, we are going to have not only a chat, but a practical showcase where we will explore how safety by design can be applied to emerging technologies, such as AI chatbots that are relevant to the African context. And without further ado, allow me to introduce our first speaker and contributor to this session, an individual who I have had the honor of working with and be mentored by, Mr. Victor Ndede, who is the head of programs at Amnesty International. Welcome very much, Victor. And as we kick off this conversation, could you please share and on your own understanding, how would you define safety by design? And why is it such a critical approach for ensuring that technology does not perpetrate or amplify harm against women and girls in all their diversities? Welcome, Victor.
Very good. In fact, the last part, safety incidents. I should not take the last part, please.
Yes, Victor, please feel free to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Victor.
Yeah, so I think if I look at just understand safety by design, we're essentially looking at proactive and preventative approach in how technology is developed that user safety and human rights at the very center of the design, the development, and the deployment process, because tech can be used, you can look at the development phase, you can look at the deployment phase, you can also look at the design phase, and it's very important that safety is thought through at this phase. It's also important for us to think about it's also important for us to think about how safety by design basically shifts the power or the responsibility of safety from the user to the service provider or the product developer. And so we essentially say that rather than simply creating or developing reactive systems to safety concerns, you actually proactively anticipate safety when you're designing and developing systems, and therefore we require tech developers and deployers and designers to basically anticipate, assess, and mitigate potential risks and harms that are associated with those products and features before they are launched. I think the core principles we'll be looking at is what is the the service provider responsibility, and this basically places burden on the companies and the products to understand, assess, and address potential harms. There's also the aspect of user empowerment and autonomy because you have to provide users with accessible tools, intuitive tools. About the design decisions, the data practices, the data protection practices, rules and enforcement mechanisms, feedback loops, closing the feedback loops in terms of safety, what are the reporting mechanisms and how does someone get feedback from the report. I think that's what I'll start with Judy on safety by design.
Thank you very much, Victor. And I think there's a little bit of echo coming from your end, but just to reiterate some of the key principles, safety by design principles you have mentioned, you have noted one of the core principles as service provider responsibility, which gives the onus of ensuring that they're building safe platforms to the tech platforms themselves. The aspect of user empowerment and autonomy, ensuring that users of the digital platforms have control and that they are also reflecting their experiences and they have control of how they engage in the digital platforms, including being able to anticipate and respond to harms that occur. And last but not least, you have also mentioned the issue of transparency and accountability, which is essential to ensuring that platforms not only are transparent about how they build their tools, and being accountable for the harms being perpetrated on their platforms, ensuring that they're providing adequate safeguards as well. And while on that note, I may just have a follow-up question on, with many tech products being designed in the global north, but essentially being used widely across Africa and beyond, what are some of the region-specific risks that product developers, should be factoring in during their assessments and their threat assessment to ensure that they better prevent TFGBV in the African context?
Yeah, thank you. And I think I'm seeing some comments in the chat that some people could not hear me. I'll try to be as loud as possible, and apologies. I'm taking this call using some hotel Wi-Fi. I've traveled out, and it could affect the quality of my audio. But just to get to your question, Judy, when you think about the region-specific risks, one of the first things I will look at is low digital literacy. And when you look at digital literacy and safety training or safety literacy, is low amongst majority of our population in the African context. And this is particularly even further exacerbated in women and girls. And looking at that, you realize that they cannot probably fully, people cannot fully understand privacy settings, how data is collected, the risks associated with sharing personal information and data. And here the risk then is perpetrators of TFGBV basically exploit this lack of awareness to actually either hack, extort, phishing attacks, and many other attacks for that matter. The other thing that I will talk about is probably the intersectional discrimination and offline harm, or basically the continuum of offline violence online as a huge risk that is not often assessed. And we're looking at the continuum of safety and how whatever manifests itself offline also manifests itself online as a risk. And here we're saying, like the state actors, the non-state actors, using technology, looking at the perpetrators really using technology to surveil, dox, and engage in gender disinformation. It's often in environments where legal recourse is significant. So we're looking at legal systems or the legal landscape is not able to provide recourse, or the system is weak, or the system is actually biased in and of itself, that it's not able to protect people. And then there's, of course, the inadequate content moderation, and this is largely because content moderation is largely in the major global
Thank you so much, Janet, and apologies if this has been a bit fast-paced. We do also recognize that there may be some challenges with connectivity, but we will try as much as possible to project and ensure that we are getting a good experience. So just to reiterate some of the key points that Victor was talking about in terms of intersectional risk from an African context, he did mention the issue of digital literacy and lack of awareness as a key area that whereby the lack of information and lack of awareness of TFGBV and online harms itself being exploited by perpetrators, either using this to amplify more harm upon others. And also Victor did mention the issue of the continuum of violence online and offline, and legal and political landscapes having gaps that are being exploited and amplify the harms. And he did also mention that inadequate content moderation or the lack of multilingual and context-specific moderation is also a factor that is driving the harms and some of the risks that platforms need to be aware of. Another key point that Victor did mention was the issue of high cost of data and accessibility to reporting mechanisms, which often are in the are online, thus also hinders survivors or victims of TFGBV from reporting cases. And as we wind up the conversation, I'd love to hear from Victor in terms of AI. And we have noted that it has proliferated in terms of the tools that are being used, integration on social media platforms, and many, many other ways that AI and emerging techs are being used. So how can we ensure that safety by design principles are applied in a way that protects users against harms? Victor, to you.
Taibat, and then Sherry.
Judy, apologies. Victor seems to have dropped off. Maybe you can, I don't know if you can recap just the questions and then hand over to Taibat.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you for flagging that. So just wanted to wrap up the conversation that we've had. We have had about safety by design being a very, very critical approach in terms of proactively anticipating the harms before they occur on the digital tools, rather than the reactive approach to react to harms after it occurs. And the fact that technology platforms need to ensure that they are mitigating and addressing the risks as they build and conducting threat assessments, and also ensuring that they have a contextual approach to it, meaning that African context and issues such as multilingual content moderation are put to place because we understand the context that is being discussed, and also ensuring that the tools are accessible to the bigger spectrum of users of digital platforms. And just as we wind up the session, and in the interest of time, I'm honored to hand over to our colleagues to be able to demonstrate some of the safety by design tools and principles that they've been able to outlay in their tools. I hereby pass it on to Taibat Hassan and her team to be able to demonstrate. So Taibat, over to you.
Thank you very much, and I hope you can hear me. I sincerely apologize because nature happened and I'm a bit behind on time, but my colleague is here, so it will definitely jump in if I need to go. We're really excited to be able to present a safe space, which is an innovative project that focuses on supporting survivors, women and girls in West and Central Africa. And we are from Brain Builders Youth Development Initiative, headquartered in Nigeria. Can I have the next slide? Thank you. So a safe space is the result of years of field engagement with survivors, women and girls, dialogues with community, religious leaders, and cries of young women who wanted a safe space where they can be believed and also heard. As an organization, we do host solidarity breakfasts and conversations with survivors, and we hear stories of online harassment, abuse, and of not knowing, where to turn for help. The anonymity of, digital technology has been said, and it often makes it even harder, for women to identify who is behind this act. and leaving them to, feeling powerless and isolated. I remember one young woman saying to me during one of the sessions that even if something bad happens, I won't tell anyone because they will just say it's my fault. And that really struck with us. And that is the gap that a safe space is.
Taking into cognizance different local contexts and slangs as well. And that's why we continue to have co-testing workshops with different critical stakeholders, from tech to civil society organization to legal practitioners to those who are providing opportunities for survivors. And a critical component of it is the male allyship as well that we have inaugurated in Nigeria, Ghana, and Togo. I know Benin Republic and that of Cameroon is also coming up later this month. Another aspect of this is the safety manual that we have co-created and developed as well that could be used by other civil society organizations or practitioners in the field to talk about and do capacity development program around TFGBV. So the rationale behind the use of the word Kemi. Kemi is a Yoruba language word that shows protect me, adore me, support me, so that, of course, survivors of TFGBV knows that there is a safe space where they could get support in near real time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And at this juncture, I'd also love to welcome Sherry Oyer from Kictanet. Please feel free, and we have 4 minutes, please.
Can you hear me, Judy? Confirm if you can hear me.
Yes, you can.
I would love to have my slides shared as well. That's possible. Alternatively, I can share my screen. Okay, I think I can go. Thank you very much. Just go to the next slide. Yeah, so my name is Sherry Oyer. I work for Kictanet. Kictanet is Kenya ICT Action Network, and we are an ICT policy think tank. Our 4 main pillars of work are research, policy advocacy, multi-stakeholder engagement, and capacity building. Next slide, please. Based on our 4 pillars of work, and specifically focusing on TFGBV, in 2023, Kictanet conducted research that covered 28 counties within Kenya. And the purpose of this research was to look at how the prevalence or the trends of TFTBV in Kenya. And that research, of course, revealed that there was a disproportionate effect of TFTBV. More women said that they had experienced TFTBV as opposed to their male counterparts. And based on that research, we then, in the same year, 2023, we came up with a memorandum that we were presenting to Parliament. At that time, the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act was being amended. So our memorandum was specifically dealing with the issues that we had noted during the research and focusing on TFTBV. However, we very quickly realized that our numbers, our samples were small. And of course, even though there's evidence on online platforms that this is a prevalent vice, they still were not, our recommendations are not considered and they're not put in. So I think one of the things that we realized from that, and I just found this quote recently, that when we count, we remember, and when we remember, we resist, and when we resist, we create change. That's by Audrey Mungeni. But basically just saying that it was important that we have the numbers and we need to put in a repository and a platform where we can always remember and go back to. Next slide, please. So basically how then that informed the experience from that informed our next steps, was that we've come up with that OGBV tracker. So basically this tracker is open source and it is available on the Ushahidi platform. And this is how it looks. This is the interface of it on the platform. I'll not go into demonstrating on how it works, but I'll just go to the next slide to explain further. Please, next slide. So the features of the tracker is that it provides anonymity, so anyone can go into it and report on that platform. It provides anonymity. You can use it across the world, and then of course we are also able at the back end to classify what types of TFTBV. That's something that you also realize, that sometimes we lump the different forms of TFTBV together. Then also to preserve evidence, considering that sometimes people delete posts, we also have an opportunity to a feature that allows you to submit screenshots of the posts. And of course, there's always review and verification of authenticity of posts on the back end as well. Next slide, please. We found out that while the platform is open and we have officers within the organization that are collecting data on a day-to-day basis, we also wanted this to be available to users across the world as well. But we found that it is very difficult sometimes to have people going into the platform to collect data or to report on that. So now we have a WhatsApp chatbot. It's called Blinzy. I think it's similar to, the meaning is similar to Kemi. Very interestingly, Blinzy basically just means to protect, and that is what this chatbot is. And Blinzy is available in both Swahili and English. So also because of the way Swahili is now widely used across Africa, especially, we thought that we should incorporate Swahili as well. So our reachability is expansive. But also in terms of even someone who wanted to try it out, the number on the Blinzy chatbot is available on the slide, so you can try it out and report. So when you see a post that is that leans towards TFTBV, you can easily take a screenshot and post and chat with Mlinzi and provide that evidence as well. Next slide, please. So what are the trends that we have noted? While even in our quarterly reports, we say that X, for instance, Facebook are mostly the ones that have higher numbers, but we also realize that these numbers could be because of the fact that they are open and therefore we are able to find this. Most of the times when TFTBV happens in closed spaces, in closed platforms like WhatsApp, Signal, they are not reported. So that is that challenge that we're getting, that the open versus closed. And then a lot of the things that we've learned a lot, that a lot of TFTBV, especially across Africa, is happening in local languages. Kenya has 60 local languages, for instance, and therefore it is very difficult to track. And of course, also even in terms of the training of the algorithms and the content moderators, they're not trained in the local languages or to flag local languages. So most of the TFGBV that happens in those languages are not don't go undetected. And then we have a lot of now requests for offline support, that is mental and psychosocial support. We have requests for support in terms of reporting to law enforcement, ODPC, and even litigation as well. The tracker adaptation, as I've mentioned, is a bit slow, and that's why we also incorporated Lindsay as well, so that it would be easier for people to use their WhatsApp that they already have as well. Next slide. The opportunities that we've had as an organization that focuses on issues of research and policy advocacy. This is a platform or a repository that can be used for future research and policy advocacy work, because then we'll be able to get evidence from that and present as well. And of course, we've also now had opportunities to also look at focusing on what platform owners need to do in terms of training the algorithms and training content moderators. We have had conversations with TikTok, for instance, and also presented to them this challenge, and also some of the resources that we have. So once we realize the issue of languages, we have come up with lexicons that are focusing on 6 languages now in Kenya, that the keywords that are being used in these languages therefore can also be used to train their algorithms as well. So these are some of the opportunities that you're seeing. Next slide. Yeah, so in conclusion, you can always look at our work that you have done. We have put in the link to our website generally, but on issues of TFGBV and the discussions that you had today, we have a lot of resources. For instance, the research report that you have, the tracker as well, you can check it out, the Lindsay chatbot, and all the 6 lexicons that you have developed based on what the findings that you found from the tracker and just experiences on online platforms. Thank you very much, and I give it back to Judy.
And thank you very much, the Kemi team, and thank you to Victor and our speaker. Apologies, team, we've been able to go 5 minutes over time, but we do hope that this conversation has inspired change. And just in conclusion, I want to say that TFGBV is an everybody problem. It's not just a women's issue, and we look forward to being part of the change. My colleague Catherine Otono has shared some of the resources that we are working on TFGBV as well. And thank you and kudos to the UNFPA team for convening this session. We do look forward to continued engagement. Thank you very much, and back.
Thank you so much, Judy Karioko there, moderating what I think is such an integral part of the fight against TFGBV, really showing some of the platforms that are addressing it in real time, whether it's through chatbots, talking about Lindsay over there as a chatbot, Kemi as well. Even earlier on, Victor speaking to proactive and preventative approaches, and Taibat talking about the Kemi chatbot as well. Very, very interesting insights, and I think these are the kinds of programs that could play a really, really big part in addressing TFGBV, and I think in sort of like resourcing them at scale could be something that could make a difference. So once again, thank you very much, Judy, for that segment. Just before we go to mobilizing collective action on TFGBV, we want to take this opportunity to thank all of you who are listening in, who are participating, asking questions, seeking solutions, like the rest of us on the continent and beyond. I'll go through a few names just to give some quick shout outs, and then we'll move straight into the next segment. We have Godelive Manirikazi from Burundi, Ziporan Deritu from Kenya, Helen Mageto, also from Kenya, B. Pamela Tufu from Cameroon, Kevin Ziada from Uganda, Shadrach Elim from Turkana, Dorcas Muthengi, also from Kenya, Parfait Haba from the DRC, and Maru from Cameroon, as well as Consolata Waithaka from Kenya. Thank you all so much for participating, chatting, asking, and really trying to play a role in this symposium. Let's move along to our plenary session now, mobilizing collective action on TFGBV. It's our final plenary for this symposium. Now, this moderated dialogue will bring together advocates, government leaders, technologists as well, to discuss collaboration and coalition building across movements. We will have our moderator, Khadija El Usman, who is a Senior Program Officer at Paradigm Initiative. She is going to introduce her speakers, who include Flor Jinou, Executive Secretary, National Institute of Women, Frida Wawera Nyaga, Acting Executive Director, Coalition on Violence Against Women, and Amanda Manyame, Digital Rights Advisor, Equality Now. So now let's hand this over to Khadija, who will moderate this plenary session for us. Khadija, welcome.
Okay, checking that you can hear me quite all right.
Yes, we can hear you and see you, Khadija. Over to you.
Thank you so much, and good morning to everyone. It's a privilege to welcome you to this important conversation on mobilizing collective action to address technology-facilitated gender-based violence. I am Khadija Usman, and I serve as the Senior Programs Officer for the Anglophone West Africa region with Paradigm Initiative, and I have the honor of moderating this session. Across sub-Saharan Africa, digital technologies have become vital tools for expression, for advocacy and connection, a lot of which you've heard over the past few days. Yet we all know that these same platforms have been increasingly weaponized to silence women, journalists, activists through online harassment, non-consensual image sharing, disinformation, and targeted abuse. Unfortunately, a lot of us, even on this call, can relate to some of these challenges. And while a lot of us can relate to some of these challenges, the challenge goes beyond just recognizing them, but how we can respond collectively across movements and across borders. So addressing TFGBV is more than just isolated interventions. It calls for coalitions that link feminist movements, digital rights advocates, human rights institutions. We must build coordinated frameworks that translate research into measurable and collective action. And this panel brings together remarkable leaders who are shaping that transformation. We have Flor Jinou, Executive Secretary of Benin's National Women's Institute. We have Frida Wawera Nyaga, Acting Executive Director at the Coalition on Violence Against Women, and Amanda Manyame, Digital Rights Advisor at Equality Now. And together we're going to explore what genuine collaboration looks like. So let me get right into it then. So I will be starting with Flore. So my first question for you is, why is collective action critical in addressing TFGBV, especially in sub-Saharan Africa?
Merci, bonjour Khadija, j'espère qu'on m'entend bien. Vous pouvez confirmer que vous m'entendez bien? J'espère que vous m'entendez bien. Bonjour à toutes, bonjour à tous et merci vraiment pour cette invitation. Je suis très honorée de participer à cette réflexion continentale sur un sujet aussi essentiel pour l'avenir des droits des femmes et des filles en Afrique. Alors, pourquoi est-ce que l'action collective est si importante? C'est tout simplement parce qu'un seul acteur à lui seul ne peut véritablement pas venir à bout d'un problème aussi complexe que celui des violences basées sur le genre facilitées par la technologie. Tout simplement parce que les violences basées sur le genre facilitées par la technologie, comme d'ailleurs les autres violences, sont un croisement entre la technique, le social, le juridique et le culturel. Sur le plan technique, par exemple, nous savons que les violences s'appuient sur des outils numériques et sur des failles de sécurité, piratage de comptes, vol d'images, géolocalisation abusive. Et donc, ici, la technologie qui doit nous être utile devient comme une arme de destruction massive. Okay? Sur le plan social, les violences facilitées par la technologie reflètent et viennent amplifier des inégalités qui existent déjà. OK, ces inégalités-là, nous les connaissons, hein. Hier, nous avons parlé de ce qui se passe avec les femmes en politique, par exemple, les militantes, les féministes, vraiment par rapport à la problématique du cyberharcèlement, des campagnes de dénigrement, des campagnes de diffamation. Et le sexisme, en fait, qu'on connaît dans la rue, se déplace maintenant tout doucement et s'est déjà déplacé et s'est installé en ligne. Et quand tu as une femme, c'est beaucoup plus compliqué pour toi. Sur le plan juridique, nous avons des lois, certes, en tout cas, le Bénin est très avancé par rapport aux lois contre les infractions commises à raison du sexe des personnes. Mais dans plusieurs lois, les questions de harcèlement en ligne, la diffusion non consentie d'images intimes, les menaces numériques, ces types de violences-là ne sont pas encore clairement définis et sanctionnés. Et donc, les victimes se heurtent à des procédures lourdes, des procédures longues. Les agents ne sont pas très bien formés forcément. Et il n'y a vraiment pas de plateforme qui puisse permettre d'aider à ce genre de choses. Enfin, j'abordais le volet culturel. Sur le plan culturel, les normes sociales entretiennent la honte et le silence. Ça, nous le savons. Il y a trop de victimes qui sont blâmées, qui se culpabilisent parce que la société les blâme en fait, alors qu'elles devraient normalement être soutenues. Et donc, le sexisme en ligne est banalisé et c'est perçu comme quelque chose de tout à fait normal, d'ailleurs, et même drôle. Vous verrez, quand vous regardez un peu les commentaires en ligne, c'est complètement tourné, voilà, en drôlerie, si je peux m'exprimer ainsi. Donc, voilà quelques raisons pour lesquelles nous devons impérativement agir ensemble parce que la technologie n'est pas neutre et c'est seulement une action collective, une action coordonnée et une action multisectorielle qui peut vraiment nous permettre de créer un espace sûr pour les femmes et les filles. Voilà pour ma part. Merci.
Thank you so much, Flor. You even started to, I think, address some of the next question that I had for you, which, you know, I'm going to be staying with you. And my next question for you was about the gaps that currently limit collaboration across movements. But I hear you when you say things like the cultural norms and people just not taking some of these issues seriously the way we see them on social media. So I wanted to know if you had any additional thoughts to that.
Est-ce que vous voulez parler des obstacles qui freinent la collaboration? C'est de ça que vous voulez parler? Ou on reste toujours... vous pouvez...
Yes. Yes, what currently is stopping these collaborative movements like you have described?
D'accord. Il y a plusieurs... Parfait. Bon, il y a plusieurs faits, hein. On peut voir le sujet sur plusieurs angles. La première des choses, c'est en Afrique, hein, peut-être dans les autres parties du monde, mais en Afrique, nous avons ce problème de fragmentation-là. Qu'est-ce que j'entends par fragmentation? Il y a plusieurs initiatives. OK, il y a plusieurs initiatives, il y a plusieurs acteurs. Il y a des acteurs nationaux, il y a des acteurs... ce sont des initiatives qui restent un peu isolées. Il n'y a pas vraiment une réelle synergie régionale. OK? Bon. Nous avons à l'Institut national de la femme, dans notre programme, un de nos programmes du plan stratégique qui est exclusivement et uniquement consacré à la coordination et à la synergie des interventions de lutte contre les violences, peu importe le type de violence. Donc, il y a ce premier axe-là. OK, on pourrait regarder le sujet sur ce plan-là. Des initiatives un peu dispersées. L'autre chose, et nous l'avons évoqué dans la première et même la deuxième partie au niveau du premier et du deuxième panel, c'est que nous savons que les violences existent. Ça, il n'y a aucun doute, ça, nous le savons. Mais nous ne mesurons pas encore avec clarté et exactitude l'ampleur des dégâts. Ni l'ampleur des dégâts, ni les, comment je dirais, les formes précises, les manifestations que ces violences-là, que les violences basées sur le genre facilitées par la technologie peuvent prendre. OK? Ce serait bien que l'on ait ces informations-là par pays, pourquoi pas par région, de façon à ce que ces données-là, on puisse après traduire ces données-là en plaidoyer. Il y a aussi le fait que, bon, il y a une certaine méfiance quand même qui s'installe entre les acteurs publics, privés, les mouvements féministes, qui vient un peu handicaper l'action collective. Donc vraiment, voilà les trois éléments que je vois tout de suite qui peuvent expliquer ce genre de choses. La chose que nous devons retenir, c'est que personne ne détient la solution, mais c'est ensemble, d'où la problématique de l'action collective. C'est vraiment ensemble que nous allons pouvoir créer des espaces de dialogue, des espaces sûrs, bâtir la confiance entre acteurs. Je pense que ce sont des éléments très importants sur lesquels nous devons véritablement pousser la réflexion.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you, and thank you for expanding a bit more on that. So my final question for you is, you had mentioned that this is something that we've spoken about through yesterday and today. We know the violence is there, we've seen it, and we've also seen that the research around this area is continuing to expand. But how do we move from research to collective action? How do we go from research and collecting data to measurable collective action together on TFGBV?
OK, merci beaucoup, Khadijat. Comme nous le savons, la recherche, la collecte de données, que ce soit des données quantitatives, des données qualitatives, sont des éléments fondamentaux. Mais avoir les données seules ne change pas la réalité des choses. Encore une fois, ce sont les actions collectives qui viendront transformer ce que nous vivons actuellement. Moi, je pense qu'on peut réfléchir sur trois leviers. Le premier levier, c'est de pouvoir traduire les données en un plaidoyer vivant. Qu'est-ce que je veux dire par là? Nous avons des chiffres, nous avons des statistiques. C'est de pouvoir raconter les chiffres, en fait, au travers des histoires humaines pour interpeller les décideurs, les institutions et autres acteurs de la chaîne de prise en charge. C'est important. Donc, transformer, en fait, traduire, je vais dire pas transformer, je vais dire traduire les données en un plaidoyant vivant. La deuxième des choses qu'on pourrait faire, c'est de créer des observatoires nationaux religieux. Nous avons l'observatoire ici pour la mère et l'enfant, leur feu, de la famille, de la mère et de l'enfant. Mais c'est pouvoir créer des observatoires nationaux, régionaux. Pourquoi? Parce qu'il est important de suivre les vieux. Il faut pouvoir suivre ces violences-là, les documenter, voir les tendances et évaluer le progrès pour pouvoir adresser maintenant avec des réformes pratico-pratiques. Ça, c'est le deuxième axe que je vois. Et le troisième axe, on vient de parler de ça, c'est de pouvoir impliquer directement les entreprises technologiques. Il faut les impliquer dans la co-construction de solutions pour pouvoir avoir, par exemple, des outils de signalement. Ce sont les entreprises technologiques qui peuvent nous aider à avoir ce genre d'outils-là, donc des outils de signalement efficaces, pouvoir aller sur la thématique de la modération, de la responsabilité des acteurs, mais aussi de ces entreprises de technologie-là. Et avec tout ça, nous, acteurs de la chaîne de prise en charge, nous pourrons plus facilement aller sur la mobilisation, j'allais dire la sensibilisation des différents utilisateurs. Parce que oui, l'utilisateur utilise la technologie, mais c'est la technologie qui est le moyen qui est utilisé. Dans le cas-ci, pour commettre cette infraction-là, pour commettre cette violence-là. Donc, et la technologie et l'utilisateur de la technologie sont à prendre en compte dans le processus. Donc, voilà un peu les trois leviers traduire les données, les statistiques en des plaidoyers vivants, pouvoir raconter les chiffres. On a telle donnée, qu'est-ce que ça traduit? C'est cela qui va interpeller les gouvernants, les institutions à pouvoir prendre des lois, à pouvoir prendre des politiques. Ensuite, avoir des observatoires nationaux, régionaux pour suivre, mesurer, documenter les tendances, voir les progrès et voir comment on peut piloter, réajuster à chaque fois et impliquer aussi les entreprises technologiques dans cette lutte-là. C'est très important. Merci beaucoup, Khadija.
Thank you so much for your powerful contributions. I'm stuck on the way that you started, which is that the data alone cannot do anything. It must be translated into advocacy. So thank you very much. I will be moving on from you now to Frida. And I want to know whether or not you agree with Flora when she says data alone cannot do anything, while also asking you, how can feminist and digital rights movements work together to tackle TFGBV?
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Loud and clear.
Okay. I'm agreeing with Fro, but at the same time emphasizing that research is very critical for evidence-based advocacy. So the two must go hand in hand. Now, coming back to your question on how can feminist and digital rights movement work together to tackle technology-facilitated gender-based violence, I'll say three things, of which most of them have already been mentioned in today's conversation. But the first one is related to research to drive evidence-based action. And here we must invest in continuous intersectional research on emerging TFGBV trends. And this data is critical for understanding who is targeted and how TFGBV is evolving. And then we must use that evidence to inform our policy efforts and to demand that tech companies develop better safety tools that genuinely protect users, especially the marginalized groups such as women and girls and children. We must also work together to advocate for a comprehensive policy and accountability of the tech platforms. And one of the ways we can do this is for advocating for simple and easy to understand and use TFGBV reporting protocols across platforms and jurisdictions. Related to this that we can explore is strategic litigation, which is a powerful method for pushing tech platforms to be accountable against technology-facilitated gender-based violence. And by selecting specific high-impact legal cases, we can directly challenge platforms' inadequate content moderation, harmful design choices, and the successful litigation can set crucial legal precedents, compelling platforms to implement safer technologies and ultimately lead to the change that we are looking to see in terms of safer digital spaces. And then we must work together by prioritizing survivor-centric support to survivors of TFGBV. And I must say that there has been a lot of normalization and victim blaming towards survivors of TFGBV, which should add so that survivors can feel free to speak out and to report cases of TFGBV. And in the past, and also in the current, we have had whereby when survivors of TFGBV go to report cases to relevant authorities. You'll hear their asked questions like, why were you talking to him online? What were you wearing in your profile picture? Why did you post that picture? And then comments like you are overreacting. And therefore, we must challenge this in order to foster a conducive digital environment, and also to encourage survivors to speak out. We should also offer timely, accessible, and comprehensive trauma-informed support services. And this includes legal aid services like legal advice, court representation, psychosocial support, and this must be timely and accessible to survivors of TFGBV with diverse identities. Thank you.
Thank you, Frida. You've spoken about a lot of ways that both sides can work together to make things easier, well, as easy as it can possibly be for survivors of TFGBV. I wanted to hear a bit more about what principles would guide this coalition building and ensure that there is not only inclusion, but there is also sustainability in the process.
Thank you very much for that question. Let me start by saying that the most critical principle is the principle of intersectionality and also power shifting. And I must say that women and girls are not a homogeneous group. They have diverse identities based on gender, age, disability, education level, religion, and many other factors. And all these interact to create unique form of discrimination. Therefore, in order to put the intersectionality into practice, we must ensure that we are actively seeking out and centering the voices and leadership of those most affected by TFGBV. And let me say this, that inclusion is not just inviting, it is about shifting power to ensure that diverse lived experiences shape strategies and outcomes during in coalitions. And then the second principle is the one related to the principle of transparent leadership and governance. And this has a lot of influence on the sustainability of coalitions. So we must ask ourselves, who holds power in these coalitions? So there must be transparent governance, which means establishing clear written rules for how decisions are made or how funds are shared and who is accountable. And we must ensure that coalitions adopt consensus decision making, making sure that the minority voices are heard in every space. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Frida. Thank you for highlighting intersectionality and not just centering the voices of those most affected, but shifting power to them. I think you've basically answered my final question, which was how we can center their voices within these alliances. I just wanted to know if you had any additional thoughts. I know you've already mentioned especially shifting power, not just bringing them into the room, but ensuring that they are, in fact, at the center of decision-making and the leadership around that being transparent. But if you have any other additional thoughts, we'd be happy to hear.
Thank you. Just allow me to reiterate that we must treat survivors as not just as program participants, but as leaders of movement and alliances. And this calls us to ensure that they are occupying key decision-making and leadership positions within digital and feminist alliances. And related to this is that tokenism is not inclusion, and we must shift and share power with those most affected. What I want to mention is that when we are engaging them, we must establish trauma-informed and survivor-sensitive and responsive environments where participation does not re-traumatize them or exploit their experiences. By them sharing their stories, it shouldn't amount to sacrificing their well-being for our advocacy work, and this calls us to ensure that their agency and security is non-negotiable foundations of our work. Thank you.
Oh, I forgot to unmute. But thank you so much, Frida. You had some very, very powerful insights there. And my favorite has to be tokenism is not inclusion. It is not inclusion. Thank you so much. I'll be moving on from you and I'll be speaking to Amanda next. Hello, Amanda. You've heard a lot of the wonderful insights from our two speakers before you. We've spoken about why collaboration is important. We've spoken about what it looks like or what it should look like. So my question to you is whether or not there are any models in sub-Saharan Africa that are showing promise when it comes to this regional collaboration.
Thank you so much for having me and for that question, because I think it really responds to nothing is happening in Africa. Well, a lot is happening in Africa, and across sub-Saharan Africa, there are a number of promising models that highlight the strength of collective action. For instance, the African Online Safety Fund, as well as CIPESA's Africa Digital Rights Fund, exemplified this by supporting local organizations in implementing activities that advance digital rights and develop community-based and tech-driven solutions to address TFGBV. There's also networks like the Africa Digital Rights Network, which comprises of activists, academics, analysts researching digital rights in Africa. We also have feminist tech justice initiatives, and we also have the Women's Rights Online Network. And lastly, we have Equality Now's Alliance for Universal Digital Rights, AUDRI, which is also working toward a digital future where everyone enjoys equal safety, freedom, and dignity. These networks are connect gender and digital rights movements, offering platforms for evidence exchange, supporting survivor-centered policies through evidence-based advocacy, and ensuring African voices shape global and regional norms for digital safety. The most promising models are those that bridge grassroots innovation with policy advocacy, allowing us to learn from one another and develop an ecosystem of shared solutions rooted in African realities. So there are definitely a lot of promising collaborations happening on the continent, and I'm excited to see them grow.
I have to say, I am just excited as you are. It's really great to hear all these efforts that are going on in Africa. And it's even more exciting to hear about the efforts all together in one space. It does, in fact, sound very promising. So I wanted to follow up with that, with what you think the role of the African Union and other regional bodies can play when it comes to amplifying cross-country action.
The African Union plays a significant role in ensuring rights-based efforts against TFGBV. For instance, by utilizing its digital transformation strategy, along with its gender equality and women's empowerment strategy, it can highlight TFGBV as a vital issue and also as part of a continuum of gender-based violence within digital governance and within human rights. There's need for greater regional alignment, though, which can be achieved through stronger implementation of existing frameworks such as the Maputo Protocol and the new African Union Convention on Ending Violence Against Women and Girls, as well as the Malabo Convention, particularly if more member states ratify and enforce these mechanisms with explicit gender-responsive provisions. Regional organizations such as the EAC, SADC, ECOWAS can enhance these initiatives by harmonizing laws, facilitating cross-border investigations, and prioritizing survivor-centered digital evidence handling. Additionally, they possess the authority to bring together governments, tech platforms, and civil society to promote accountability. So ultimately, these regional entities can help prevent isolated efforts and ensure that our collective response to TFGBV reflects its transnational nature and addresses the harm effectively across borders.
Thank you so much, Amanda. I have one more question for you, even though we're already getting quite short of time, which is one, if you can tell us one or two, maybe one due to time, that government or civil society organizations or even private sector can take to strengthen coalition efforts, especially after a symposium such as this one.
Okay, so I think I had two, but I think my one could be that civil society organizations after this call can join AUDRI, the Alliance for Universal Digital Rights. Currently, AUDRI members are actively engaged in legal and policy reform aimed at building a digital future for everyone, where everyone enjoys equal rights to safety, freedom, and dignity. And some of the forward-looking work that AUDRI members are working on is how to monitor states' implementation of international and regional frameworks. So this is work that can be done at grassroots level, and this is work that can be done collectively. Also making sure that civil society shares survivor-centered practices and promotes a coordinated, unified advocacy effort across different countries in Africa, as well as in the rest of the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amanda. It also speaks to your expertise to be able to shrink all of that into what I think was 30 seconds. But thank you so much. And thank you to all our panelists so far. This is usually the point where we take any questions or comments from the comments section or the Q&A. I see the Q&A is empty. I would like to assume it's because the panelists were so mesmerizing you forgot to type in a question. And I see that the comment section is buzzing a lot. Lots of hands clapping. So here are your flowers. I will just read a comment or two and then we can move to the... Okay. I do see one question and maybe we can take that. So the question goes, how can local organizations working directly with adolescent girls and young mothers collaborate with global AI safety and digital rights networks to localize solutions for TFGBV? I'm hoping the panelists got that. How can local organizations, especially in Kenya, working directly with adolescent girls and young mothers collaborate with global AI safety and digital rights networks to localize solutions for TFGBVs? So I think that is the only question we have time for. If anyone would like to take that quickly.
I can take that if that's okay.
Sure, please go ahead.
I think by building a movement across the continent, we can then understand the different issues that happen at grassroots level across the different countries. So at Audrey, one of the things that we are definitely trying to do is to not just work with traditional digital rights, CSOs, but to also work with women's rights organizations and many others that may not have traditionally worked on digital rights issues. And by doing this, it is a platform where, for instance, if the grassroots organizations may not have worked with international mechanisms, they have a platform to be able to do that now, a platform to be able to understand the different and honestly difficult processes that you would have to follow. And also by collaborating, for instance, when you want to go to certain platforms within the UN and the AU, you need to have observer status. So sometimes grassroots organizations do not have that. So by collaborating, we're able to ensure that those that have observer status are able to either take along some of the other CSOs that do not, but are also able to amplify the voices of all the CSOs that are in the coalition. So definitely building that movement across the different issues, whether it is the online or the offline issues of GBV, we definitely need to collaborate. And I think there was one comment that I saw in the comment section around that the AU is not working on TFGBV. So the AU actually is working on TFGBV. They're just calling it digital violence against women and girls. So there's quite a number of work currently happening. And I know that there is a study that they are working on. And I think by maybe early next year, there should be some validation processes. So work does happen, but the only way that the work can be amplified is by working together as CSOs so that we're able to share this information, we're able to participate and amplify the voices of those that may not necessarily be aware of all the work which is actually happening. Sorry, I need to reduce my pace. So sorry. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Amanda, for taking the question. And we are officially out of time. So I wanted to say thank you to our panelists for your insightful reflections. It is clear from today's conversation that collective action against TFGBV is not just necessary, it's urgent. As our first panelist, Flori, highlighted, TFGBV affects every facet of life, from personal security to social equality, and we must start to translate data into research and coordinated advocacy and accountability. Frida reminded us that coalition building must be survivor-centered, it must be intersectional, and it must be grounded in transparency, while Amanda pointed us to existing regional networks like FemNet, Equality Now, African Digital Rights Network, and of course, highlighting some of the important work the regional bodies are doing. So in closing, we must remember that our greatest progress will come not from working in isolation, but all of us working together. So I want to thank you, our distinguished panelists, once more, and everyone who participated, and of course the organizers for creating such a wonderful space for our shared purpose and action. And I would now be handing the mic back over. Thank you very much, and lots of flowers to everyone.
Lots of flowers to you all. Also for you, Khadija, take your flowers. That was a fantastically moderated session, so informative, and really hopefully these conversations are going to shape programs and policies and conversations that move beyond the Africa Symposium on TFGBV and to all the spaces where it's needed. So thank you very much, Khadija, for facilitating that session. A lot of keywords came out from there. I think she summarized them so well. I don't even need to get into it too much, but inclusion, intersectionality, survivor-centered approaches, shifting power, and also speaking to what bodies like the Africa Union are doing, should be doing more perhaps, to amplify and release studies on what they are also discovering on this issue. And just like that, we're coming to the closing ceremony. Can't believe it's already day 2, and we're already at the end of what has been a historical symposium, the first of its kind, that really focuses on TFGBV on the continent. And we're going to now hear a few remarks from those who have made this happen and been part of the conversations from yesterday into today. So as we wrap this up, we move to our closing ceremony. This is a moment to reflect, a moment to commit, and to celebrate collective efforts. To start us off, I would please like to welcome Mr. Anders Thompson, the UNFPA representative Kenya, to deliver a call to action as we begin to conclude this important convening. Mr. Anders, welcome.
Thank you so much. I mean, this is really amazing. And yes, these 2 days have passed so quickly. There's so much information shared by panelists, views of different people. And I think that with our partners in government, with the support of Global Affairs Canada and others, we are all revved up to really take action. So I feel my call to action is in a way already anticipated by all of the great work that has transpired over the last 2 days. And I know that we will now look forward and continue with even more strength and with more resolve than ever before. It's been so interesting to listen to everyone here. And I'm so glad that this is not just something we are doing in a few countries, but this is really now becoming a movement that we see is getting born and will take root in all of Africa and the entire continent. So for the call to action, obviously this is repetitive because it has come up in the discussions again and again. But if I need to make a call to action, the way we see it at UNFPA, the way we want to organize our work, of course, everyone has a different role, but I can summarize it in 4 points. And the first call to action is really, and I think it's very important, number one, is to really make sure we harmonize and strengthen legal and policy frameworks. Of course, we need governments to be in the lead here. We need intergovernmental organizations. The African Union was just mentioned in the last session. We really need to get this going. So we need to engage with legislatures. We need to make sure that budget is allocated for TFGBV responses so that this can take roots in terms of codes of conduct, guidelines, standard operating procedures, reporting systems. Without these, we're not going to be able to have good legislation and implement it in an accountable fashion. So that's really important. And when things go wrong, we also need to have very strong institutions and instruments, tools to make sure that we can effectively investigate and prosecute cases, because it needs to be known out there that this is not okay. And I think that if people think they can get away with it and there is no follow-up action, we will not see a change. So that's number one, and it's paramount for all of us. Secondly, and this is a tough one, we need to have platform accountability, or safety by design, as someone was calling it. And this really goes to the heart of the matter. The social media companies, the big conglomerates who are rich, they have enormous power over the space. And of course, they don't want to be held accountable, right? This is really difficult, right? But we must continue to demand transparency, accountability from these technology companies. And we must get in there and co-create with them safety by design standards, so we can make progress on that front. Here we need to have alliances between the North and the South. Africa cannot do this alone. We cannot stand up to Meta. We cannot stand up to other such big companies alone. So we need to work with US, Europe, others to achieve this. But it's very, 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 very important. Coming to my third point, the people who operate in this space, the women, the boys, they need to have a much higher digital literacy and awareness. So we need to continue to work with the grassroots to sensitize. We need to make sure that education systems target adolescents and women, and we need to make sure that they themselves increase their agency so they can live in a way that is where they protect themselves and ensure their own digital safety from an early age. I think this is really very, very important, and we will continue to do that with the community from UNFPA's side.
Okay.
The fourth and last call to action is to strengthen coordination and partnerships. That has to be multi-sectorial. I was reminded of such a powerful word in the last session, is that we are creating a movement, a movement of actors, UN agencies, NGOs, institutions, individuals who are champions. And we are doing that so we have robust whole society coordination with everybody who needs to be involved. So this can sustain efforts through global programs like this one to make all spaces safe. And so we need to engage with feminist movements. We need to engage with survivor movements and so on, so we can really make progress. Of course, these are the 4 calls of action. So legal frameworks, platform accountability, digital literacy, and then creating a movement through coordination and partnership. Of course, all of this must be survivor-centered. We must have data so we can be armed as we go to the battlefield. That has been covered very, very well. And I really hope with these few remarks that we can achieve freedom from technology, facilitate gender-based violence. We must approach this as a human rights issue, but also acknowledging that this is an economic imperative and at the heart of strengthening the democratic principles that should be alive in any country where there should be free speech and nobody should be afraid of engaging in a digital space. So with these few remarks, I want to thank all the collaborators, everyone who has poured their hearts and souls into this webinar, and of course to Global Affairs Canada, to all our partners, to the government of Benin, the government of Kenya. I'm truly proud of being associated with this movement and this work that has been accomplished over these last 2 days, knowing, of course, that this is only a first important step for the continent. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anders Thompson, who is the UNFPA Kenya country representative, terming the TFGBV really as that battlefield and sharing those 4 important points, the call to action in terms of how we can progress the fight against TFGBV. Thank you very much for that. As we continue with our closing ceremony, the next person who's going to give us their remarks, we're honored to introduce once again Madam Uget Bope Nakaja, President of the National Women's Institute of Benin. Welcome, and please share your own closing remarks.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone, and I hope I am heard.
Yes.
I'm going to make my remarks in French. Distingués invités, mesdames et messieurs les représentants des gouvernements et des institutions partenaires, chers experts, chercheurs, militantes et acteurs de la société civile, mesdames et messieurs, alors que nous arrivons au terme de ces 2 jours de réflexion, sorry, there was a problem. Est-ce que vous m'entendez? Please, are you hearing me?
Madam Uget, you can continue.
Okay, thank you very much, and I'm very sorry. Alors que nous arrivons au terme de ces 2 jours de réflexion, de partage et d'engagement, j'entends encore la voix de la poétesse Wangoye qui déclamait hier. They hide behind their screens to make us scream. Ils se cachent derrière leurs écrans pour nous arracher des cris de douleur. Ils nous privent de notre droit au consentement et se servent de nos vies pour nourrir les contenus de leurs publications. Ce symposium répond à ce cri du cœur collectif en ouvrant un nouveau front dans la lutte pour la dignité des femmes et des filles d'Afrique. Nous avons exploré les VBG facilités par la technologie dans tous leurs aspects, y compris en politique, en période de crise ou de conflit, ou encore en lien avec certaines professions telles le journalisme, la défense des droits des femmes. Et comme l'a dit Madame Quinta, dont le témoignage nous a particulièrement touchés, la technologie n'est qu'un miroir sociétal. C'est donc sur le contenu que nous renvoie ce miroir que nous sommes appelés à agir. Car les violences numériques ne sont pas virtuelles, elles sont réelles, destructrices, et leurs impacts sont individuels, mais également systémiques. Nous avons entendu des témoignages bouleversants, des analyses éclairantes et des propositions audacieuses. Le diagnostic est clair. Les violences facilitées par la technologie sont une menace croissante pour les droits fondamentaux. Et elles échappaient souvent à nos politiques et à nos lois actuelles. C'est pourquoi les cadres juridiques et institutionnels doivent évoluer pour intégrer les éléments de prévention et de répression idoines face à la fulgurance des effets dévastateurs de ce fléau. La prévention, la sensibilisation et la réparation doivent devenir prioritaires dans nos politiques publiques. L'éducation numérique doit être au cœur de la réponse africaine et il y a également une urgence qui a été énoncée par Audrey Mugeni. When we can't, we remember. When we remember, we resist. When we resist, we create change. Il s'agit de la production, de l'exploitation, du suivi de données probantes, incluant des données qualitatives pour assurer des indicateurs et des réponses appropriées. Nous avons également identifié des leviers concrets de changement, renforcer la coopération régionale pour harmoniser nos plaidoyers, nos programmes, nos approches politiques et nos législations. Faire de la place aux organisations de la société civile pour un plaidoyer puissant et de la sensibilisation à la vigilance numérique. Mobiliser le secteur privé technologique afin qu'il prenne sa part de responsabilité et créer des espaces de soutien et de résilience pour les survivantes, là où la technologie a blessé, mais peut aussi guérir. L'Afrique, plutôt que de subir la technologie, peut transformer les expériences en expertise. Nous pouvons créer nos propres outils, nos propres plateformes, nos propres politiques numériques protectrices. Et je crois profondément que le combat contre les VBGFT doit s'inscrire dans une vision panafricaine. Le Bénin a eu l'honneur d'accueillir ce premier symposium africain qui nous assigne une responsabilité morale collective, celle d'ouvrir la voie, d'expérimenter, de documenter et de partager, celle de créer un cyberespace où les femmes pourront coder, concevoir, innover sans craindre d'être effacées. L'Institut national de la femme continuera à renforcer la coordination nationale autour de la lutte contre les VBG et une réparation, travailler avec les ministères, les médias et les acteurs communautaires pour ancrer une culture de sécurité numérique et de respect en ligne. Et avec nos partenaires, notamment l'UNFPA, nous poursuivrons l'ambition d'un environnement numérique africain favorable. Mesdames et messieurs, l'heure de la prise de décision, au-delà de la promesse, est venue. Promettons-nous de transformer les résolutions de ce symposium en actions concrètes et mesurables. Promettons-nous de rester unis entre institutions, communautés, médias, acteurs technologiques. Et en refermant ce symposium, je vois le début d'un mouvement continental enraciné dans la conscience que chaque espace, physique ou numérique, doit devenir un espace sûr. Je nous invite donc, en repartant d'ici, à être les ambassadeurs de cette nouvelle vision de l'égalité, à porter nos discussions dans nos ministères, nos écoles, nos plateformes et nos communautés. Souvenons-nous que ce n'est pas la technologie qui rend le monde dangereux, c'est le silence des justes face à son mauvais usage. Je vous remercie pour votre engagement et votre foi dans un avenir numérique égalitaire. Ne nous taisons plus, agissons. Et je déclare, non, je m'en tiens à cela, que chacun de nous, en retournant chez lui, se souvienne que nous n'avons pas fait simplement un symposium comme les autres, mais que nous sommes chacun débiteur d'un acte, d'une position, d'un plaidoyer pour que devienne une réalité, un nouveau monde, un nouveau cyberespace africain où les femmes ne sont plus effacées. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Ms. Uget Bope Nakaja, speaking very powerfully about what we need to take from this symposium and emphasizing that it's not technology that's bad, it's the actors who use it badly, and that's what causes TFGBV, and also saying that this is now a collective call to action. It shouldn't just be a symposium that ends with words, but follows through with action. Thank you so much for emphasizing that. Next, please join me in welcoming Ms. Magdalene Kipkene, Deputy Director for Gender, State Department for Gender Affairs and Affirmative Action, Ministry of Gender, Culture, and Children's Services. She is representing Honorable Anne Wangombe, Principal Secretary, Ministry of Gender, Culture, and Children's Services, to give her closing remarks. Over to you.
Good morning, Janet and everyone. Good morning. It's already afternoon, sorry.
Good afternoon. You may go on. Thank you.
All right. Because my screen is displaying partially, but I hope I'm seen. So this afternoon, on behalf of the ministry, which has been co-hosting this symposium in a special way, I would like to acknowledge every participant and speaker who managed to contribute very insightfully to the deliberations based on the theme on context, from context to collective action. We've learned so much, and I think at this level, it will not just be context to collective action, but now from learn insights to action. So one thing that is clear from the discussions in the last 2 days is that TFGBV is a universal challenge, and that technology has brought both opportunities and challenges, which in this context is issues of TFGBV, which affects the the discourse on gender equality and women's empowerment discourse. However, technology should not be a tool for harm, but a tool for empowerment. And the biggest lesson that I've learned is that each of us has a role, just like earlier speakers have alluded to play, whether it's government, our development partners, very kind partners, UNFPA, and all those who have contributed to this discourse, all organizations who participated, policymakers, we all have a role in ensuring that online world reflects the values and respect of dignity. So in a nutshell, in a very special way, being an inaugural, it was the first one, an inaugural symposium. My proposal is that it will not just be the end, but that we can have periodic sessions where we can reflect on and review progress across all the strategies that have been proposed, from policy interventions to technology, safe designs, and community initiatives, advocacy. So there's so much, a range of raft of things that we need to do to address, because TFGBV in many countries is not yet, it's a form of GBV, it's an emerging area. And I believe with this concerted effort, we are going to do so much. So with those remarks, we want to thank everyone, the organizers, the ones who supported us, the participants who have enthusiastically followed the proceedings. It shows that these are a big area of interest, and together we can overcome TFGBV. So 1,000 miles starts with one step. So thank you so much for that. And I wish everybody a good time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Magdalene Kipkene, that a journey starts with one step, and that hopefully this first symposium will lead to subsequent sessions that can continue to address the growing issue around TFGBV. Thank you for those remarks. We can now introduce Ms. Rebecca Kelly, Head of Division of Partnerships, Research and Emerging Technologies at the State Department for ICT and Digital Economy, to share her closing remarks for day 2 of this symposium. Over to you.
Thank you, everyone. Allow me to ride on the protocols already acknowledged. Thank you to UNFPA and partners, all the organizers, excellencies represented, participants, and the great contributors to this great symposium. On behalf of the Ministry of Information, Communications, and the Digital Economy, we wish to register our gratitude for these great discussions and insights that have been brought forward through these discussions. Technology facilitates the gender-based violence we are discussing, but also technology can be a great ally in combating this same violence. And therefore, it's my rallying call that we need to involve and partner with technology developers and technology owners, more specifically the digital platform owners, in this great cause. And one of the things in this collaboration is to ensure safety and security by design, taking into account all the user groups. Another call is to have harmonization of effective policies to combat this type of violence, regionally and also globally. And globally, I would recall to have global alliances, leveraging on bodies such as the United Nations. And in this, we would request that this type of conversation can be escalated to the United Nations General Assembly, where the heads of states can commit to be part and parcel of mitigating and fighting this vice. And it is at such level where we can compare the technology providers and digital platform owners to ensure that their platforms comply with the safety and security policies that are being set forth. And to conclude is that we need to be having a citizenry that is aware, that is digitally empowered, so that they know their rights offline and online, so that they are able to make the right decisions and also to report matters in the right channels, safeguarding their safety even at their personal levels. The other matters have been captured more by Mr. Anderson of UNFPA, and allow me in the interest of time not to repeat them. So to conclude, this has been a great symposium with great discussions and insights. And we do hope that this discussion will not just be left at the symposium level, but we'll be able to engage further, especially the institutions represented, to ensure that collective we work to ensure safety of all our users and our people online. Thank you very much.
And we urge our participants to also just continue staying with us for this symposium. We will still have a closing keynote and a few other speakers that we have lined up just to wrap up this symposium and the importance of a symposium of this nature. Now we'd like to welcome Madame Evelyn Dabire, Head of Cooperation at the Embassy of Canada office in Cotonou. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Je ne vais pas répéter le protocole, mais je tenais quand même à remercier. So my speech will be in French, with just a few in English. I would like to thank the ministries that are represented here in Kenya and Benin, et remercier tous les panélistes et les experts pour leur participation et leur contribution à cet échange. Donc, c'est un plaisir pour moi de prendre la parole au nom du gouvernement du Canada pour exprimer toute notre reconnaissance pour votre participation active et la richesse des échanges qui ont marqué ces 2 jours de réflexion. Malgré la distance, nos débats ont démontré avec force que la lutte contre les violences basées sur le genre, notamment celles facilitées par la technologie, demeure une priorité partagée. Cette forme de violence en constante évolution et de plus en plus répandue dans nos sociétés appelle une réponse collective, coordonnée, innovante et inclusive. Comme l'a mentionné son Excellence George Taba hier lors de son discours d'ouverture pour le Canada est fier de s'associer à UNFPA et à ses partenaires au Kenya et au Bénin pour la tenue de cette première édition du Symposium africain sur les violences fondées sur le genre, facilité par la technologie. Cet événement arrive à point nommé dans un contexte mondial marqué par le recul des droits humains et une accélération fulgurante des technologies, des progrès technologiques. Je tiens à saluer le leadership et l'engagement du gouvernement du Bénin et du gouvernement du Kenya dans la prévention et la lutte contre les VBG, y compris celles qui se manifestent dans l'espace numérique. Votre mobilisation constitue un pilier essentiel pour protéger les communautés et promouvoir l'égalité des genres et la sécurité pour toutes et tous. La collaboration entre États, institutions et acteurs de la société civile est essentielle pour bâtir des réponses efficaces, inclusives et durables. Le symposium qui nous a réunis aujourd'hui et hier incarne cette ambition collective. Il a été l'occasion précieuse d'examiner les différentes manifestations de violences basées sur le genre, facilitées par la technologie, de mieux comprendre les enjeux, d'identifier les défis et de discuter des pistes de solutions concrètes. Qu'il s'agisse de renforcer la sensibilisation, d'améliorer la législation, de protéger les victimes, de favoriser la coopération intersectorielle, d'assurer un accompagnement juridique ou encore de promouvoir un usage sûr et responsable des technologies, les recommandations issues de nos échanges sont porteuses d'espoir et d'action. La qualité et la diversité des panélistes réunis pendant ces 2 jours a indéniablement enrichi les discussions. Leurs expertises, leurs expériences et leurs innovations ont permis de faire émerger des réflexions ambitieuses et des actions concrètes des actions concrètes porteuses de changement pour la région. Comme has mentioned by several, I think UNFPA rep mentioned it in his closing remarks, and we heard also throughout the sessions, no country or organization can address TFGBV alone. It demands collective action, demanding that government, technology companies, and civil society work together to build a digital ecosystem rooted in accountability and respect. Critically, we must ensure that women and girls are not only protected in digital spaces, but are shaping them in their capacity as coders, designers, policymakers, and as leaders. Je ne saurais conclure sans remercier chaleureusement toutes les organisations, les experts et expertes, ainsi que toutes les personnes qui nous ont suivis depuis les différents pays. Votre engagement et votre contribution ont été déterminants pour la réussite de ces échanges. Je vous encourage tous et toutes à transformer les enseignements et recommandations de ce symposium en actions concrètes afin que la technologie devienne un outil d'émancipation, comme l'ont mentionné plusieurs, et de sécurité et non un vecteur de violence. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Madam Evelyn Darire, speaking very powerfully there about how women should also be part of shaping these spaces as coders and gamers, therefore giving some agency to how safely they're designed. Thank you very much for those remarks. We will now hear from Ms. Josephine Miliza, Global Policy and Regulation Lead at the Association for Progressive Communications for the Local Networks Initiative. Over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Government representatives, colleagues, partners, and all protocol observed. It's an honor to join and to be part of this important conversation. Allow me to appreciate UNFPA Kenya and Benin country offices, the government of Kenya and Benin, Global Affairs Canada, and all partners that have been involved in preparing for this inaugural symposium. This gathering is not only timely, but it is necessary. It brings together people, institutions that must work hand in hand to ensure that every space, online and offline, is truly safe for women and girls in all their diversity. I speak on behalf of the Association for Progressive Communications, APC, which is an international network of civil society organizations that use information and communication technologies to advance social justice, human rights, and environmental sustainability. At APC, and particularly through the Women Rights Program, we have worked at the intersection of digital rights and women's rights for almost 30 years. Over the past decade, technology-facilitated gender-based violence has become a key area of our advocacy because we recognize that the same technologies that connect and empower us can also be used to harm and silence. Through the Local Networks Initiative, we are exploring community-centered connectivity models that can strengthen digital inclusion and safety, ensuring that expanding access also means expanding protection, agency, and resilience for women and girls in all their diversity. Before centering on TFGBV, let us acknowledge how over the past decades, ICTs have become a powerful tools for women and girls across the continent. Tools that have opened doors to education, to income and information, that have enabled access to social services, platforms for expression, and resources on sexual and reproductive health and rights. These technologies have enhanced women's agency, autonomy, and safety, and have helped in addressing inequality, discrimination, and barriers to justice. Yet, as much as technologies can empower, they can also harm. And taking action to end TFGBV cannot stand apart from the broader efforts to eliminate gender-based violence. It must be embedded within them as part of a holistic, inclusive, cross-sectoral response that connects health, education, legal, and justice systems. Understanding how TFGBV manifests in our local context is a shared responsibility. We must recognize TFGBV as part of a structural problem of gender-based violence. For failing to do so means that we are overlooking decades of struggle and ignoring how deeply TFGBV is rooted in the same inequalities that fuel all forms of gender-based violence. Spaces like this are essential. They remind us that real progress comes from collaboration and collective action. We at APC greatly appreciate UNFPA's leadership in creating spaces for collaboration between governments, regulators, civil society, and survivor networks, and we encourage the continuation of such partnerships to build a truly coordinated African response to TFGBV. There is also a vital role for government and policymakers to make TFGBV a national priority by fostering interministerial collaborations across gender, ICT, justice, and education system. Yesterday, from both governments, we had the importance of one, localizing TFGB responses, and second, ecosystem-wide capacity building. And so the call to action is clear that we must strengthen access to justice, psychosocial support, and accountability through coordinated and community-rooted action. We also need continued capacity building across the ecosystem among law enforcement, the judiciary, policymakers, educators, and platform providers to ensure that every actor contributes to a safer and more inclusive digital environment. At the same time, regional and national laws must move towards harmonization, frameworks that both prevent and mitigate TFGBV, but at the same time, they must uphold digital rights and freedom. Protection and freedom must always go hand in hand. Finally, our response must also evolve from reaction to prevention. States and partners must invest in digital literacy, gender-sensitive safety design, and survivor-centered mechanisms. Closing access gaps is also vital in connectivity, literacy, and language, and that not only strengthen survivors' capacity to seek justice, but also the ability for all women and girls in all their diversity to exercise agency, claim digital rights, and drive inclusive. APC to remain a committed partner in advancing collaborative, inclusive, and right-based responses that make spaces for women and girls. Thank you, Janet. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Josephine Miliza. They're talking about we need to move from reaction to prevention, and talked a lot about other ways in which we can make sure that online spaces are safe, that expanding access should also include expanding protection. Thank you for your emphasis on that. Now, I'd like to invite Madame Konu Leontin, President of Rifronga Benin, to share her remarks with us this afternoon. Welcome. Hello, do we have Madame Leontin, President of Rifronga Benin? If so, the floor is yours to please share your closing remarks today. Participants, please bear with us as we try and make
Vous
sure
m'entendez?
Okay. Yes, thank you. We can hear you.
D'accord.
Please continue.
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup. Au nom du réseau pour l'intégration des femmes des ONG et associations africaines Rifronga Bénin, nous remercions sincèrement le gouvernement du Bénin, du Kenya et du Canada et le FUNIAP de Cotonou pour nous avoir associés depuis la formation et à ce symposium. Nous sommes très heureux de suivre le symposium depuis hier jusqu'à l'heure où nous parlons. Nous avons beaucoup appris en tant que société civile et nous insistons et implorons les gouvernants à mettre vraiment des moyens pour la recherche afin qu'on puisse avoir des données qualitatives et quantitatives fiables pour des politiques applicables. Et nous, société civile, cela nous faciliterait la tâche dans la sensibilisation des populations. Nous insistons également sur la création des plateformes qui ont été proposées et que ces plateformes soient vraiment rendues fonctionnelles pour nous aider dans la lutte. Nous apprécions beaucoup le travail en synergie, les coalitions qui ont été proposées, car seuls nous ne pourrons pas y arriver, mais ensemble nous serons plus forts. Nous implorons les gouvernants, les communautés à soutenir les femmes violentées parce que ce n'est pas facile et surtout à dénoncer parce que sans la dénonciation, nous ne pouvons rien. Aux partis politiques, nous les implorons au renforcement de capacités par rapport à ce phénomène afin que les femmes puissent être mieux représentées et être efficaces au sein des partis politiques pour un meilleur développement de notre pays. Nous insistons par rapport à la prise en charge des survivants des violences basées sur le genre et facilitées par la technologie, c'est-à-dire la prise en charge matérielle et leur réinsertion, parce que c'est très important. Après ces actes, ce sont des femmes qui sont vraiment frustrées, qui sont recroquevillées dans leur coin et qui ont l'impression qu'elles ne servent plus à rien dans la société. C'est pour cela que nous devons les aider à retrouver leur place, à vivre comme tout le monde. Nous affirmons notre disponibilité en tant que société civile aux côtés des gouvernants, des institutions pour faire aboutir la lutte contre ce fléau dévastateur. Nous disons merci à tous les participants, à tous les représentants des différents pays et nous leur demandons de ne pas lâcher après ce symposium car la lutte continue pour des résultats meilleurs. Je vous remercie.
Thank you as well for those remarks. That is Madame Kunu Lonton, President of Refonga Benin, talking about how the fight must continue beyond this symposium. And now we're pleased to invite Mr. Richemont Tiemoko, the UNFPA representative in Benin, to deliver his closing reflections. Over to you.
Thank you. My intervention will be in French. Okay. Merci donc. Excellences et distingués représentants des gouvernements de la République du Bénin, du Kenya et du Canada, distingués participants et modérateurs, c'est avec vraiment une profonde gratitude et un réel sentiment d'accomplissement que je prends la parole maintenant pour donner mon mot de clôture à l'issue du premier symposium africain sur les violences basées sur le genre, facilitées par la technologie. Pendant ces 2 journées intenses, nous avons ouvert un dialogue africain essentiel sur une problématique encore méconnue, mais désormais incontournable. Nos échanges, nos analyses et nos témoignages ont donné un visage concret et humain à la réalité des violences basées sur le genre facilitées par la technologie. Derrière chaque statistique, nous avons rappelé qu'il y a des vies à protéger, des droits à défendre et des espaces à rendre plus sûrs. Nous repartons, ou je dirais, je repars et je suppose que c'est le sentiment de tous. Nous repartons donc avec des convictions fortes et je voulais donner 3 de ces convictions ici. La première est que la technologie peut être un outil de domination ou d'émancipation selon la manière dont nous choisissons de l'utiliser, de la réguler et de l'enseigner. Les violences basées sur le genre facilitées par la technologie ne sont pas une fatalité, mais un défi collectif qui appelle à une action concertée à tous les niveaux, que ce soit politique, institutionnel, communautaire ou individuel. Troisième point, et surtout que le combat n'est pas celui des femmes seules. C'est un combat de la société, un engagement pour la dignité humaine où les hommes ont tous aussi leur place comme alliés et acteurs du changement. L'esprit de ce symposium doit se poursuivre au-delà de ces échanges d'aujourd'hui et d'hier. Dans cette dynamique, nous lançons bientôt la campagne mondiale des 16 jours d'activisme contre les violences basées sur le genre, sous le thème, et je cite, « Tous unis contre les VBG ». Ce message fait écho à nos discussions. La lutte contre les violences exige l'unité, la solidarité et l'action collective. Et nous l'avons démontré pendant ce symposium avec la collaboration des différents gouvernements et des acteurs sur le terrain. C'est dans ce cadre que l'UNFPA, en collaboration avec le ministère du Numérique et de la Digitalisation, conduira une campagne panafricaine de sensibilisation numérique dans le cadre du programme mondial Making Our Space Safe, le programme MAS. Elle mobilisera les institutions, le secteur privé, les jeunes, les influenceurs et la société civile pour faire de nos espaces virtuels des lieux de respect, d'égalité et de sécurité. Avant de conclure, je tiens à exprimer ma profonde gratitude aux co-organisateurs, en particulier au gouvernement du Canada pour son soutien financier et politique, au gouvernement du Bénin et du Kenya pour leur leadership, leur engagement constant, à tous nos partenaires pour leur précieuse collaboration, à toutes les institutions et organisations représentées pour leur dévouement et leur contribution. Je voudrais aussi remercier particulièrement les interprètes, les facilitateurs, les modérateurs et modératrices qui nous ont permis de nous comprendre et d'échanger sur ce continent africain, sur un sujet aussi important. Ce symposium n'est pas une fin, mais c'est le début d'un mouvement africain uni contre les violences basées sur le genre, facilitées par la technologie. Les recommandations formulées ici et l'appel à l'action, comme mon collègue Anders l'avait mentionné tout à l'heure. Donc, ces recommandations et l'appel à l'action guideront nos prochaines actions, nos plaidoyers et nos politiques. Je nourris l'espoir qu'ensemble, nous faisons en sorte que chaque espace, qu'il soit physique ou numérique, devienne un espace sûr pour toutes et pour tous. Et pour cela, le leadership et l'engagement de chacun et de chacune seront clés pour cette transformation. C'est sur cet espoir que je voudrais conclure mon intervention à ce premier symposium africain sur les violences basées sur le genre facilitées par la technologie. Je vous remercie pour votre engagement et votre contribution.
And thank you as well to Mr. Richmond Tiemoko for also what the UNFPA offices in Benin have been able to do as part of putting this symposium together. We appreciate that very much. And finally, to close this symposium, I would now like to welcome our keynote speaker. She is Madame Ghislaine Chao, and it's our privilege to have her give us a closing keynote address, and then we'll go to next steps before we finally conclude day 2. Over to you.
Hello. Hello.
Hello, yes. We can see you and hear you.
Me recevez?
Yes.
D'accord. Bonjour, madame.
Sorry, please put your phone still if you're able to, madam. If you can just place it somewhere still, and then you can proceed. Oh. A moment to see if she can settle and give us the keynote address this afternoon. Let's just give her a few moments, and then I'll be taking us through briefly next steps following the closing of this symposium and what to expect next. For now, we're waiting on Madame Ghislaine to give us the keynote address. Madame Ghislaine, we can't hear you. Madam Ghislaine, please unmute and keep the phone steady so that we can see you well. Thank you. Over to you.
Allô?
Allô? Yes?
J'ai activé le micro. Bonjour, madame, messieurs, chers participants. Je me présente devant vous aujourd'hui en tant que survivante des VGB-FT. Mon histoire est celle de beaucoup d'autres, mais elle est également unique. Aujourd'hui, je veux partager avec vous mon expérience, non pas pour définir mon identité, mais pour contribuer à un mouvement plus large de changement. Les VGB-FT facilités par la technologie sont une réalité sur le plan mondial. En effet, elles prennent diverses formes, notamment le harcèlement en ligne, la diffusion non consensuelle d'images, la cybercriminalité. Mais derrière chaque statistique, il y a une personne, une histoire, une famille. Je veux rendre hommage à toutes celles qui ont survécu à ces violences, qui ont trouvé la force de se renforcer et de se battre pour leurs droits. Votre résilience est une source d'inspiration. Ce symposium est une occasion cruciale de réflexion collective à des solutions concrètes pour prévenir ces violences et soutenir les survivantes. Elle est essentielle.
Oh, it seems we have unfortunately lost Madame Ghislaine briefly. Let's see if we can get her back.
Oui, allô, vous me recevez toujours?
There we have her. Okay, Madame, please continue with your closing remarks.
Ce symposium est une occasion cruciale de réfléchir collectivement à des solutions concrètes pour prévenir ces violences et surtout soutenir les survivantes. Elle est essentielle que nous travaillions ensemble pour créer des politiques, des programmes et des communications sûres et solitaires. Je souhaite que cette discussion nous mène à des actions concrètes et durables. Nous devons nous engager à écouter les survivantes, à amplifier leur voix, à agir pour un monde où la technologie utilisée pour autonomiser, non pour nuire. Il me plaît de rappeler que le rôle principal des survivantes est de mettre en avant l'importance de l'expérience vécue, car elle offre une perspective unique et cruciale pour élaborer des stratégies efficaces. Merci.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ghislaine, and thank you for sharing so bravely that you yourself have been a survivor of TFGBV and you are standing in solidarity with many others across Africa and across the world indeed. Thank you for sharing so bravely your own experiences with us. And now, ladies and gentlemen, that is how we come to a close of today's symposium. Please allow me for just a minute or two to walk us through the next steps. First, an outcomes report summarizing today's feedback and key insights will be shared soon. This report, along with all communication materials, will be available on both the UNFPA Kenya and UNFPA Benin websites. Secondly, we encourage everyone to take the discussion pointers from the symposium and use them in your advocacy, especially because we are coming up to the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence that run from the 25th of November to the 10th of December. So some of your voices and actions will be vital in turning today's dialogue into tangible impact. So please integrate some of the learnings that have come out of this symposium right into that very critical advocacy period that will be starting in about 2 weeks. And we really want to thank you for your participation and commitment. And so just like that, we've come to the close of the first ever symposium in Africa on technology-facilitated gender-based violence. And just as we heard from a number of the speakers, this should not be the last one. And hopefully there will be subsequent sessions that continue to enhance strategies to push back on TFGBV. It's been an incredible 2 days. We've heard insights, we've heard courageous stories and testimonials, innovation, but above all, collective commitment. And especially that has come out a lot today. The call to action from a number of our speakers in their closing remarks has spoken to collective commitment. We've unpacked the realities of TFGBV and showcased practical solutions and pathways to action. And this symposium has really shown us what's possible when Africa comes together with one voice and one mission and one vision as well. And on behalf of the Government of Canada, UNFPA in Benin and UNFPA in Kenya, the governments of Benin and governments of Kenya and civil society, I'd like to extend our deepest gratitude to every one of us. And we heard Mr. Tiemoko also sharing that, our speakers, our moderators, our panelists, our interpreters, sign language experts, technical teams, and of course, our participants for joining from across the continent and beyond. Your presence and engagement have made this gathering such a critical and powerful moment, not just of connection, but also of change. A special thank you to our interpreters for ensuring every voice was heard, every idea understood across our 6 working languages. You have really made this symposium very, very inclusive, and we thank you for your dedication and professionalism. And as we part, just some parting words for you to carry with you. Let's have a shared vision for safer, more inclusive, and equitable digital spaces. And it really does start with every single one of us, because we all have a role in making the spaces safe, From the entire organization team and the incredible team that's been working hard behind the scenes here around me, thank you, merci, asante sana, obrigado, shukran, for being part of this historic First Africa Symposium on TFGVB. Please stay inspired, stay connected, and look out for those materials that you can share. I'm Janet Bogwa. It's been an absolute honor guiding you through this transformative event. Until we meet again, take care of yourself, pour into yourself. It's been a bit triggering, of course, but please make sure that you take these conversations forward, and let's keep making all spaces safe. Goodbye.